uh, phone tells me it's 12:55, time for the public hearing, and it's on House Bill 650. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Dan McGuire. I represent the town of Epsom, and with me is my co-sponsor, Representative Almy from Lebanon. And we are, together with yourself, Mr. Chairman, and Senator Rosenwald, are members of the Joint Committee on Dedicated Funds. And I'm the chairman, and Representative Almy has been the longtime secretary. And what we do is, on a 5-year rotating cycle, we examine all of the dedicated funds, we look at their balances, we look at the underlying laws, and we decide if maybe there's some changes that need to be made. Every year we come up with a little cleanup bill to make such changes, and that's what House Bill 650 is. It's pretty minor. It does three main things. First of all, Cannon Mountain. So the Parks Department has basically one giant dedicated fund that runs all of their operations, all the parks, all the park rangers, all the spending and tickets and so on, plus Cannon Mountain, all the skiing activities and the winter activities. And so it turns out that they were using this particular dedicated fund as though it were split into two pieces. They were sort of separately accounting for the winter activities in Cannon and all the parks. And so this will simply create two separate dedicated funds so they don't have to have that kind of weird accounting set up with this particular one. The second one was there's a dedicated fund for giving grants to robotics education programs, FIRST teams, and things like that. And the state had been putting in, I believe it was $750,000 a year into this fund, and then it was being given out as grants. But the number of grants was less than the amount being put in, so the amount in the fund was rising and not being used for its purpose. So this simply puts in a $1 million cap on that fund. So if it ever gets, after the end of a biennium, over $1 million, that'll return to the general fund, which is where these robotics money comes from. And then finally, there's two repeals. There was a couple of places where the underlying law on a particular couple of minor dedicated funds was removed, but they didn't remember to take the dedicated funds away from themselves, and so these repeals are just cleanup kind of things. And I don't know if Representative Almy would like to weigh in on anything.
Two things. One, the tramway has been and would still be part of the winter activities, even though it's not used much in winter. It's used mostly in summer, but they do use it sometimes, and that's the way the Parks Department wanted it to be, inside of the park. And there have been problems since the split off of the historic buildings. It's been very difficult for the Parks Department to get enough money to help maintain the parks, because all they've got is these little boxes in each park where you can put in some money. That money only goes to that park. So the most popular parks are getting most of the money, and the rest of them aren't getting much of anything. So on the clearer split, I think, would help them to try to figure out how they're going to advertise the parks as a whole. But I also just wanted to put a word in for the robotics education program. This was Norm Major's main baby other than his 91 descendants. And it has been going, in recent years, it hasn't been fully used. It's been a little bit less fully used each time, probably because the towns that are left, the schools that are left, just don't have the resources to contemplate this. But I was thinking if it was capped at 500,000 or 250,000, that would be probably enough to take care of any towns that are still left that will want to do it, because I think it's really important for the education, technical education of the students. Thank you.
Questions from the senators? Senator?
A question for the sponsors and then for the department also,
Yep.
assuming they're here. You've probably read the fiscal note, which says that the robotics fund is fully encumbered. The 1.5 million. And there's a waiting list.
Yeah. Interesting.
So that's my first question.
Yeah, we did not get into that, did we? If it is encumbered, why isn't it being used?
The way I remembered it is when we looked at their annual spending, it was under 500,000, right? So that's why we put this in. Fortunately for us, you have the Department of Education following us, so that could be a question for them.
If the Department of Ed, if somebody has the answer, could come up and sit in the far seat for the LBAs, and then you'll have a microphone and everything.
Good morning or afternoon. Good morning for the record. Frank Adeblue, Commissioner of Education, and this is an item that would be discussed in our budget presentation as well, but happy to jump forward. So in the House, they had limited us back down to, instead of about $750,000 to $500,000. And there is two issues that I think are important to take into account. One is the language in the bill is talking about encumbered funds, but all of these funds are actually obligated, which basically means that 100% of our funds have been granted to the school districts. So we don't, there's no year where we don't get an application and we provide the funds to the school district. So all of the funds are being sought by school districts. Funds that are not used, we basically take the grant that is unused and then we re-grant it to somebody else who's seeking a grant as well. And so, the funds seem to be turning over. We're okay with a limitation of $1 million. If you wanted to say, like, we're not going to carry over any more of that, it will just create further pressure on the districts to basically use the funds or lose the funds. And I'm okay with that because I think that they'll turn over quickly enough that that really wouldn't cause any kind of a disruption. Like, we don't need a perpetual lapsing of these funds. We do need to make sure that we change, encumbered to obligated, because that's what allows us to even carry them over at the end of the fiscal year anyways, so.
Can I follow up?
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Am I imagining that in House Bill 2, you removed the robotics funding?
I think it was reduced from the usual 750,000 to 500.
I think
But-
it was removed.
Was removed altogether? No. We'll turn to Mickey for this question.
Yeah, I don't believe so.
Commissioner, if you'd send me an email that says how you would like that worded.
Sure. I will send an email.
Okay. Additional questions?
But I think we got an answer.
So the House passed budget provided general funds of about $483,000 a year to the robotics fund. So from the governor's $750 a year.
Yeah.
Any additional questions? All right, seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
That is the last person who signed up. Department can come back up then.
Natural.
I don't see them here, so I can't answer any questions. We're not going to act on this today, which will give you time. All right, so that was the last person that signed up. The online, there was one support, one opposed, and with that, we'll close the public hearing, and we will start the hearings from the departments, and we'll move the egg. It's the gavel with it, with the handle.
Yeah. You want me to start?
Go
Okay,
ahead.
great.
Yep.
So for the record, Frank Gadelblue, Commissioner of Education, and Tammy Valancourt, our Chief Financial Officer. She is handing out our budget presentation for you, but again, happy to answer any questions off of any pages that you have something. But we've tried to summarize some of the budget activities in a format that will be more accessible to you. For those of you who are unfamiliar, on that first slide that I have, and actually I'm just going to pause for a minute till you get your presentations. By the way, see all these tabs? These are all the HB2 references to education out of the House bill. Okay, so again, Frank Gadelblue, Commissioner of Education, Tammy Valancourt, CFO, and then behind me, I think I have everybody. I've got Melissa White, who is our Division Director for the Division of Learner Support. I've got Steve Appleby, who is our division for educator credentialing and higher education, and I've got Caitlin Davis is back there, who is managing our division of basically data analytics and reporting for the division. And then I've got some other folks from finance back there as well. So on the first slide there, you just basically see an overview of the organization. Essentially, there are 4 divisions within the Department of Education. You've got the Division of Educator Support and Higher Education, again, Steve Appleby, Division of Learner Support, Melissa, and Division of Educator Analytics and Resources, which is Caitlin. We've also got a Division of Workforce Innovation. That is a division that is in statute but has never been funded, and that individual division, which includes vocational rehabilitation, disabilities determination, SSDI, and our governance activities, reports to the Deputy Commissioner. And then obviously you've got our Office of Business Management run by our CFO. On the next slide, and I hope that you appreciate, I know that it's wide, but it was, in the House it was too small, and so we made it bigger. But I found this to be a very easy way to understand kind of what the funds flow are in education. At the top of this is basically a standard profit and loss statement. You have revenue at the top. Our revenues come from general funds, federal funds, education trust funds, other funds, and we break out the sweepstakes funds as well. And you'll see that happened at the House budget. And then you can see we've got some informational stuff relative to local education spending over the years, district enrollment, average cost per pupil. But then our spending as an agency, and we are primarily a pass-through agency, which basically means we receive funds from the state, we receive federal funds or other funds, and we pass those funds through. So in the state, you'll see the first category there is general funds, state aid. And one of the things that you will notice on this spreadsheet, we've got the agency budget, we've got the governor's proposed, and then we've got the House budget that are outlined in there. You have to be a little bit cautious because items were moved between the Education Trust Fund and the General Fund, and they move back and forth. So, for example, you'll see building aid, valued at $14,782,000, which is basically the tail that I have on my building aid, and then $12 million. Those were not recommended by the agency or the governor, but they were recommended in the Education Trust Fund. So I want you to just make sure that it's not like a new spend. It was basically, if you go down below, you will be able to see building aid, which is about 2/3 of the way down the list of Education Trust Fund at the bottom. So just keep that in mind. But essentially, we've got general funds relative to state aid, which includes our building aid program, which again was funded at $14 million, which is the tail. This is an obligation that we have, that's out there. We've got our tuition and transportation, which is our funding for our CTE programming. The other things that you'll see funded out of the House budget are the building aid lease, on Public School Infrastructure Fund. I'm going to pause momentarily on that and just point out that this is the ongoing funding that we put into school safety. And I will continue to be an advocate that we continue to invest in school safety. What we don't want to do is become one of those states where, knocking on wood, something happens and then we're reactive to that. We think that we should proactively be investing in school safety on an ongoing basis. And so you'll see that was reflected both in the agency budget, the governor's budget, as well as the House recommended budget. And then you can see special education aid, formerly catastrophic aid. And this is the funding that the state provides as almost an insurance type of a policy for students who are high-cost special education students. And I'm happy to walk through that formula with you if you're interested in getting down into the details. It can be a somewhat complicated formula. And then you have additional, and again, all of those funds that we receive, we don't actually hold on to them. Every one of those categories, whether it's building aid or tuition and transportation or building aid lease, Public School Infrastructure Fund, Special Education Aid, those funds are received by the department and are passed through to our school districts. The next category is general fund pass-through state aid. And these are some items that you specify as such. But again, you'll start with the court-ordered placements. So these are students who are adjudicated by the court system to enter into a specific educational program. And it is the state's obligation to pay for the education of those students, not the local LEA for those students. It is funded at $4.5 million. You can see it was funded at $2 million in previous years, going back in 22, 23, 21. It's never been $2 million. We have warrant authority on that. So if we spend more than that, we have the ability to spend that. And so we've reflected in here more closely what we typically spend relative to court-ordered placements for those students. Again, it's a court order. Highlighting some other things for you. So the VR field match programs, or our field programs for vocational rehabilitation, this is a match which we need to secure our federal grant, which is north of $10 million a year. So it's important that we're meeting our match. Otherwise, the MOE would result in a reduction of those federal funds that we were able to receive. School nutrition is also match funding. You can see there is our robotics fund, and you can see historically how that has been funded. For the most part, those funds are used on a regular basis, and I'm going to turn around. Melissa, did you get a look at that?
Yes, so last year we carried over about $100,000.
Could you, I'm
Okay,
sorry.
so last year we carried over, yeah, go ahead, Melissa. Sorry. She was looking up that question about how fast we've been going over and what the carryover was while you were
We
talking.
provide an annual report.
Can you say it again? Yeah.
Sorry, Melissa White, Division Director for Learner Support. So we provide a report to the legislature at the end of each fiscal year to show what was allocated to the schools, what was spent, and then what's available. In the biennium, beginning of the biennium, first year, we had allocated out the entire amount. We had about $100,000 that the schools did not spend. We then carried that over into the second year, allocated out the entire $850,000. We currently have a waiting list, and the grant is set to end at the end of the fiscal year, June 30th. And then imagine they won't spend the entire thing, but it's not going to be a significant amount that's left over. But it has all been obligated.
And when it's not used, we just reallocate it to the next person on the wait list. We generally have schools that are seeking this. So next program that you will see coming down, there was robotics, adult education, state, again, match activity there. That's a match. And again, I don't know if there are specific line items that you want to focus on, but yeah, go ahead. I want to read the spreadsheet to you. I'll let you.
So I've turned to page 1497 of the budget on the adult education where the $834,000 cut from the governor's budget is made. Could you explain that?
Sure. So this is non-match state funds that go into it. This is primarily for our adult diploma program. So these are, you would think anyways, that these are mostly associated with adults that have gotten out of our school without a diploma, and we are trying to circle back and get them a diploma. A substantive amount of those funds is actually spent on high school students. So we have about 1,700 high schoolers. I tease Sarah Wheeler, who runs this program, that she runs the largest high school in the state of New Hampshire. So these are high school students, 16, 17, 18-year-old students who are not doing well in their traditional schooling or learning environment. And so they turn to our adult education programs. And they do well in there. You know, they go to class. There's just not a lot of the high school drama that goes on for those kids. It's a little bit more of a flexible environment in terms of the needs that they might have. And so I think part of the conversation relative to that funding at the house level is, so these are students that the state is paying adequacy dollars for. So 1,700 students that the state is actually paying the adequacy for, but then we're simultaneously paying for those students to be educated in the adult education programs. So the question is whether or not we're paying twice for the same students.
Yes, if I may. So, you know, I was on the board of Dover Adult Learning Center for a number of years, and I know exactly what student population.
Right.
They may have dropped out, they may, for behavioral, I mean, there's a lot of reasons why they're in this format. Do you see any way to rectify that concern so that we can continue this funding in adult ed?
Yeah.
Because I've heard from the directors, I'm sure you have, that there's no other place for these students to go, and it's maybe the only chance they ever get a high school diploma. So I'm not exactly sure that I see it's the double funding, but is there a way out of this?
Yeah, so just for, you know, to be on the record relative to this, I agree with you. These are great kids, right? Like, so these are students that just have not found success in the traditional learning environment, and so they've gone to these other environments. They are students that we do pay adequacy dollars for, but they're educated through the adult education program. So really, that's a question for this legislature in terms of how you want to reconcile that. Is it possible that those adequacy funds then get directed to the adult education center for the students who are going over there? Or, you know, but that's just a funds flow kind of a decision. I think it's more for the legislature than the agency. So
If I may have one more follow-up. I don't know what the opinion of the committee will be, but I would like to ask, could you develop some language for an amendment that might describe how that would be done so the adult education centers could essentially charge or receive, you know, negotiate, I mean, how, maybe it would be create an agreement with the sending high school, which is, I'll call it that.
right.
So that this funding can be done. Otherwise, if you think that, aside from all that, we've got to educate these kids, and it's not going to happen otherwise, then if you have a recommendation that you would like us to try to restore this funding, I just would like to know if either of those two would work. And
Yeah, so obviously restoring the funding would be the easy answer. It doesn't address kind of the underlying element with regard to the funding streams. But I'm going to reiterate, I think what you're saying here is that these are good kids. They do get into these programs. They do graduate with a high school diploma. Many of them do go on to post-secondary or other types of career things. So the students are thriving in this environment. The question is, how should the funds flow to support the education of those students?
thank you.
Okay.
Senator
So, oh, go
Yeah.
ahead, sorry.
Following up on this, because I've been to a couple of high-set graduations in Nashua. None of the graduates were still of the age where the school district would be responsible. In fact, the one guy who sticks out in my mind was 50. And we're talking about basically 700 high-set kids in the state.
1,700.
1,700, okay. I thought it was less than that. But these are students who then have the qualifications to get a job, learn a trade, join the military, do something, and be productive community members. So I would just echo Senator Waters' request that the department help us make sure that these great programs continue to be able to grant.
So let me just make one clarifying point, though. So if a student in the adult ed diploma program is out of high school, they've already graduated or 50 years old or whatever, I actually have federal funds that allow me to pay for those. This is actually the state funds, the state non-match funds is what allows me to educate the 1,700 that haven't graduated. And the HiSET is a very different thing. So these are not HiSET students. These students actually receive a high school diploma. So the HiSET graduation is a different program. It is dominated by students who have already exited and they're coming back for their HiSET. I do have some high school kids. You have to be 16 to take the HiSET. So the HiSET population is very different from this population. So this population is adult diploma seeking individuals. 1,700 of them are high school students, and I'm not permitted under the terms of my federal grant to provide them that high school diploma. I actually have to use state funds for that. And so we have to very carefully manage that, right? Because we're making federal grants and state grants. We want to make sure that we don't, commingle those funds incorrectly.
Thank you.
Commissioner, we have Senator Pearl.
Thank you. I have to run for a bill hearing, so I got a couple questions I want to sneak in before I leave, and I apologize.
We can jump forward in the presentation wherever you want to go.
If I reroute you just a little bit. The first thing, I sit on the Public School Infrastructure Committee, and I will just assure all of you that that money is very well spent and very thoughtfully spent, so I would encourage us to keep that funding in the budget. But my questions are related to the Discovery Education Program.
Okay.
So, one of your prioritized needs for the budget was the continuation of the Discovery Education Program. Wasn't that program involved with creating a New Hampshire civics curriculum?
So it was involved in creating the New Hampshire Civics Curriculum. This funding is not for that. This funding is for the Discovery Education Platform.
Okay.
It is a platform that we rolled out during COVID to provide access to high-quality instructional materials to all the kids in the state.
Mm-hmm.
And like typically in education, it's hard to find anything that everybody uses. So the Discovery Platform is used in every school in New Hampshire. And so given the fact that every single school was using it, we're like, okay, this is a pretty popular program. It's obviously meeting a need for many of our educators to be able to quickly access, multimedia types of educational resources to engage the students so that they're not on their cell phones, another budget item. And, and so this is the reason why we have supported it here is because it is being used. And essentially what you have is a little bit like that offset that we've talked in a previous conversation. So by doing this is cost that does not show up at the local district because the state is paying for that.
Yeah, thank you. One other, if I may. How much have we spent on developing the New Hampshire civics curriculum? Do you know a number?
I do. So that was $1 million contract.
Yeah.
And it is primarily launched at this point in time. It's in kind of like a soft pilot launch. And then the final launch will be available for the September school year.
Awesome. Thank you. I apologize, but I've got to run.
And so just to clarify, so Discovery has this platform, but they are also curriculum development expertise. And so they were the ones who were selected to do the curriculum.
Great. Thank you. Appreciate the answer.
Okay, so I'll keep going. So again, big spreadsheet. Call me if you have any questions about it, but it's just one way to put it all in one place for you to take a look at. The next slide, I basically have some enrollment trends. I don't think this is a surprise to anybody on the committee. Oh, sorry, going back.
Didn't realize we'd gone beyond this.
No, not a problem.
All right. I'm looking at the tuition and transportation line.
Yes.
So unless I misunderstand the budget, we're not providing the CTE tuition and transportation funding?
No, this is part of the crazy part. It got moved to a different line. So you can see tuition and transportation now shows up after the House budget in the, like I had it in the Education Trust Fund, which is historically
Gotcha.
where it's been.
All right.
And then it got moved up by the House to it's the second line under that first grouping of spending.
So where is it?
Right under building aid.
Gotcha. Okay, I'm just.
No, and I apologize. I don't know how to
I'm
reflect the
happy
fact that they move them
because
between the
my
general
eyes
fund
were
and the other
dancing
one.
around here.
It gets confusing as it moves around. Okay. So next is, state enrollment. Then I put the different, different categories of students so that you can kind of see what the trends are, but nothing surprising there. On the next slide, slide 5, I wanted to point out these are items that were in our 24-25 budget that were one-time appropriations that we received. And I only point that out because these are, items that won't necessarily be able to continue to go forward. whether it's the Student Clearinghouse, which is, we purchased licenses for our schools to be able to access Student Clearinghouse data so they could track where those kids are going post-graduation from high school. We funded some MTSSB work. There's our Civics Education Fund, and that contract was awarded to Discovery, and they were the ones who did the civics curriculum. It's a K-12 curriculum. We've got the Computer Science Ed program that we received for $4 million. Adult education, many of the adult education centers, and Senator Waters probably recognizes this from his involvement in Dover, they were not on the short list for a lot of the COVID relief activities that took place, and so we received some one-time funds to help those adult education programs through some of that. And then in the Education Trust Fund, you had the Public School Infrastructure Fund. I got $10 million. This is the safety and security grants. There was an additional tuition and transportation grant of $4 million that we received for $4 million for CTE programs. We did that as competitive grants. It's important to do that as competitive grants because it affects our Perkins MOE.
Can I ask on that?
Yeah.
Are you going to spend that down?
We're trying. We've had continually been offering grant opportunities to the schools. It has to be offered as grants, and we've tried to make that bar as accessible as possible. The last time I checked, we had used about $1.6 million of it.
If I may.
Follow-up?
And it does carry over, so we will continue to use
That's
it.
non-lapsing.
Yeah, it's not lapsing.
Good. Thank you. Thank
Yep.
you, Madam Chair.
Kindergarten aid, episodes of treatment. This is the change that was made by between us and HHS. So when HHS put in the Fast Forward program to do the immediate intervention, crisis intervention for individuals in mental health distress, and oftentimes they'll go in and then they take that student and they'll put them in an educational program. And it was unclear between Health and Human Services and the Department of Education who was responsible for paying for that, so they gave us some one-time money. I don't believe we've used all of that up at this point in time, but it is something that will continue on into the future. And then last time, we have two capital projects that did not get funded in the capital budget and were put into the Education Trust Fund in the last budget that I will flag for you, and we will be talking about CTE centers. Coming up, I did not get funding for CTE centers in the House budget on the capital side. I know this is a different committee, but I will just put a place marker down there.
Right.
Commissioner, we have a question from Senator Rosenwald.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to go back to adult ed, without this $500,000 extra appropriation in the current budget, what will be the impact on adult ed?
Yes, so, I don't have any specific in terms of what's reduced. I have not heard back from my centers. I've heard back from my centers relative to the adult education, the diploma programs. I've not heard back. When we provided these funds to them, we were very clear that this is one-time funding and that they should use it for one-time funds as a result of the COVID catch-up type of thing. And so have not heard that that's going to be a problem. And we were very deliberate in telling them not to invest this in ongoing expenses that would cause a disruption.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So on the CTE capital projects, I know we'll have a lot of discussion about this in capital budget when the time comes. But would you be able to potentially prepare an amendment that would give the option of going to the Education Trust Fund for a certain amount that would cover that project? If, let's say the project gets approved and it's not, it's got $1 now in the capital budget, but that we might have some language that would let you go to joint fiscal to get that from Education Trust Funds if that project matures.
So essentially what you're saying is that we would have warrant authority to go to the Education Trust Fund to fund an approved program. If the capital committee approves a capital improvement at a CTE center, we would have warrant authority if we didn't get funding in the operating budget or the capital budget to be able to take it from the Education Trust Fund.
Propose that it comes from that.
It may be a little bit of a slippery slope to begin giving agencies warrant authority
Well, we've
for
done it several
capital like
We've done
that.
it several times now, haven't we?
Oh, well, yeah, but I don't have the warrant. I don't have the warrant authority. It's you guys. I don't care if you guys do that. I'm just saying, I don't know if you want me making that decision.
I wouldn't want you. I know you
so.
keep the guardrails are on you.
Okay, yeah, there we go, exactly.
Thank you.
Okay, the next slide, these were some of the reductions that happened in our budget in the House that I just thought I'd flag for you. Again, we talked a little bit about the Robotics Education Trust Fund as well. We talked about adult education. We had the student wellness. We took 5 positions out there. We had a DOIT position that we made a recommendation for. Early childhood programs, this was actually only first set up in the event that it was transferred over to the department. It has not so far been transferred to the department in any of these budgets. If it is, we do need some positions. We had a computer science program, and then the computer science credentialing program. We believe that there's about $2.5 million of that is not going to be needed. I'll pause there. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Madam
ahead.
Chair. So I noticed that the zeroing out on the youth risk behavior survey,
Yep.
we weren't putting a lot of money into it, but what was the reason for that? Is it not being done, or?
No, so that was transferred to Health and Human Services. In fact, the way that it used to work is Health and Human Services got the grant to do that. They would then MOU and grant the funds over to us, and then we would do it, and then we would transfer everything back to them, and it just sort of was like the money was just doing a big circle, and didn't make any sense administratively to just push paper around. So that was done.
One other one, too.
Follow-up?
Yeah, thank you. So on the school climate funding, is that because the federal funding ended?
You're talking about the MTSSB?
Pardon?
You're talking about the school climate. Tell me
Yeah.
which line item you're talking about.
No.
So is it student wellness?
Student wellness, excuse me.
Which one?
Well, I think it was, yeah, I guess it was student wellness.
Oh, so the federal grant, yeah, so student wellness, so the
Yeah.
school climate grant ended, right? So
Okay,
we're done
all
with
right,
that
thank
grant.
you. All right, good.
Exactly.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Ann.
Sorry, I have it all summarized here. I didn't have the line item. We talked a little bit about our prioritized needs. We talked about the Discovery Ed and the fact that all the schools are using it. The other thing that we had in our prioritized needs is relative to assessment. So the way that assessment in the state of New Hampshire works right now is we assess students in grades 3rd through 8th, and then once in high school. That high school assessment we use is the SAT. The SAT is a good assessment to use in the sense that these students take it, so whether they're post-secondary bound or not, they have that stake in the ground that kind of makes them eligible, puts them on the radar. But it really doesn't give us a lot of meaningful information in terms of trying to intervene for students who are not making progress. So this would be to implement a PSAT type of assessment, so in 9th grade. So you'd basically be able to get 2 data points for high school to see how those kids' trajectory is moving in high school. And with that early indicator through a PSAT, you would basically be able to do some type of interventions to hopefully get the kids to the place where they don't have to go to our adult diploma programs.
Senator Rosenwald?
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to go back to the learning platform.
Yes.
So this, the Discovery platform is a prioritized need for the department.
Right.
There's another online tool that I think we have on the table. Could you describe the differences between those two and why this one is the prioritized need?
Sure. So 2 very different products. So Discovery Education is essentially high-quality instructional materials. And what that means is whether you live in Bedford or Exeter, or you live in Franklin or Colebrook, you have access to high-quality instructional materials, right? So no kids across the state are being shorted in terms of the quality of the curricular materials that they have available to them. That is Discovery. The other item that you have on the table is from tutor.com, I believe. And this is a tutoring platform. So this is a 24/7, students have access to tutors. So they go home and they get stuck on a homework problem. They can access a tutor live. They can request a specific tutor. They can do live. It's got all kinds of security items set up to make sure that we're protecting the students. And it allows them to not get stuck. And so then they show up the next day. And what it really does is it helps our educators. The best implementations of the tutor.com have been what we created as a product called, or kind of a program, we called it Tutoring in the Classroom. And so essentially what that was is that educators were supposed to be using the tutoring platform in the classroom, so the kids were familiar with it, they're engaging it, while they're in school, and then when they go home, they're more comfortable and accessing that program when they get home. Because truthfully, like having a great tutoring program, if you don't access it, it doesn't matter, right? Like if you've got a tutor and you never call them, it's not going to help you. So the goal was to try and make sure that we had good uptake, and we had quite good uptake. We do have several other programs along those lines. We created schoolhouse.world with Khan Academy. We've got Khanmigo in place right now, which is also helpful for my educators in terms of helping the students. That one is obviously AI driven and not specific to a live tutor.
Follow-up?
When I asked how tutor.com was being used in Nashua, what I was told is mostly it was used by students for SAT prep. They were using it that way. Has that been your experience with other districts across the state?
It hasn't, and in fact, I don't know if they've given you the data, but I get a weekly report that shows me the various subjects that the students are accessing, and so SAT prep is one of them, but it's certainly not one of the primary tools that the students are accessing. Mostly they're seeking math support, and it's mostly middle school math, is where the kids are getting stuck. So we do have visibility into that. It was interesting, what some of the history or some of the research on this basically showed that, students or poverty communities those students tend not to engage the tutoring platforms as much just because of, maybe culturally when they go home, they feel intimidated, which is why we created the tutoring in school program, such that I think it was in our second year of program, Berlin was the winner of a prize. We drove an ice cream truck up there and gave all the kids ice cream. And because they had the highest per capita usage of anybody, but it was because the educators were using the tutoring platform in the classroom. And so when the kids got home and they got stuck on their homework, they actually felt comfortable to log in, get a tutor, and work on that.
Oh, okay. Go ahead.
Okay, so on slide 8, there's a couple of corrections that we maybe overshot in the House budget that I'm going to ask for, and I can give these to you in writing if that's helpful. We basically went through and tried to pull down positions that we thought we could do without, in the attempt to try and keep the budget as low as possible. I'm going to overshot a little bit, and I pulled 2 positions out that I still need. They are federally funded. I do have federal funds to be able to do that, but they ended up on the list, and they probably shouldn't have. And that's that technical correction. But then you can see on the next slide, slide 9, a better summary of kind of the staffing. So we abolished 20 full-time positions, 5 general funded, 15 federal funded. Mostly what we were doing there is these were positions that were vacant, and we basically looked back and said, okay, if I have a position that I haven't advertised in 3 months, maybe I don't need it, right? I'll come back to fiscal if I actually need the thing. And so we basically just tried to clean everything out that had not been activated and was being used. Sometimes I got over my skis a little bit. As well, we've abolished 7 full-time temp positions, so these 9T positions as well. And again, just trying to go through and say, like, if I've got a position that I'm not using actively, then we're suggesting that we move those aside in the interest of trying to help, move the budget forward. And if I have funding and I need something, I'm going to come back to you. But there's nothing here that's going to jeopardize mission. And then finally, we removed 10 DDS positions. So SSDI, Social Security Disability Administration, is part of our bureau's responsibilities. We have a bureau that has about 80 people in it that works on that. We regularly get calls. I think it's happened like almost every year. We get a call from the feds saying, hey, we want to expand your footprint. You guys are doing a good job. Because essentially, we're just a service center for the country for processing these disability determination decisions. And we do a good job, and so they keep calling us and trying to send us more work. The problem is that they tell us that they'll fund us more, but for the last 2 rounds, they haven't funded me the positions. In other words, they're saying, like, add 10 positions, and then I'm like, okay, well, you got to pay for them, right? And they haven't funded those positions. So so they asked me most recently, say, can you add 10 more positions? We said yes, and we put them in our budget. This was going back last summer. And but they haven't come up with the money. The way DOJ is working, I'm not confident that I'd necessarily see it. If I do get the funds, I'm happy to come to fiscal and request them at that time. Okay. Then my last, so these are some additional grants that, again, have come about since the agency budget, or that we haven't gotten into the budget yet. So we've got a nutrition training grant from the feds, and these are all grants that we have confirmed from the feds, there's not a iffiness relative to them. I know that was a question you were concerned that you had. You know, it's coming to fiscal's approved, it's coming to Governing Council tomorrow. The state opioid response grant is one that, this is a grant that the HHS provides to the Department of Education. And so that is a grant that, again, it looks like we're going to have, and if you stick it in my budget, then I don't have to come to fiscal in July. And then my Safe and Supportive Schools grant is another grant. This is one that we got a couple of months ago. We were concerned about the funding of it. There was some language in the grant that we thought may not be compliant with the activities that we were supposed to be doing. So we reached out to our federal partners. They agreed with our understanding. They removed that language from the grant and so gave us permission to go forward. And so they, you know, even within the last couple of weeks, they've committed and said, yes, we want you to do that grant. And so we're going to take that forward. And that, truthfully, will make up, that money will be used primarily around the MTSSB work that we're already doing in the state. So essentially what I've done is I've now got another grant. So the fact that I lost some of that over there, I can make it up over here. And we'll still be able to pass through funds to the LEAs on the MTSSB work.
All right. Any questions from the committee? Any additional comments from education?
No, thank you for letting us come in. If you have any questions, please call.
Great, thanks. Transportation, you're up. If you need another seat, Commissioner, you can have someone sit over there. Welcome.
Just a general statement before we leave. Many of the senators up here have public hearings in various policy committees over in the House, especially. So don't be concerned that you see the senators come in and out. This is being recorded. And in fact, I will be leaving shortly. And that's why I've left Senator Birdsell in charge. And we will get you your stuff as quick as we can. So.
Very good. Well, thank you. I'm William Cass, Commissioner of the DOT. With me today is our Director of Finance, Danielle Chandrine, and Assistant Commissioner Dave Rodriguez to help with any questions. So we have a little presentation that we'll walk you through to give kind of a high-level overview of our budget, and we tried to really focus on the instructions that we got to really focus on you know, the changes from the House in comparisons to FY24 actuals and 25 adjusted authorized. So we try to summarize that at a high level. We also handed out a budget book. We find that putting this together helps us do our annual report. It provides a little more detail on the specific divisions and org units, some pictures, a little bit more of an explanation of the work that each work unit does and what their performance measures and things like that are. So that's just there for reference, and we won't key on that, but if you have further questions about the department's budget, you may find answers there as well, too. So starting off on page 2, just a very quick summary of the department's organizational structure. We have 5 divisions under the 3 commissioners. Each division is headed by a director. And I put this in here because primarily our budget in our presentation is arranged based on these operational divisions. So the 5 divisions. And on either side of the 5 primary divisions are other reports to the Commissioner's Office relative to safety, which is a recent change that I'll hit on, and overall asset management, performance, and strategies. On page 3 is a summary of our positions and some of the trends. So the top chart shows budgeted positions against vehicle miles traveled. And I like to put this in here because I think it displays that the Department of Transportation is an efficient organization, and we continue to do more with less. We had a number of budget constraints in around 2012 to 2014, where we really pared down the department staff in terms of the numbers of positions. But in the 10 years since, other than the blip there in COVID in 2020, vehicle miles traveled, which is an indication of the use of the transportation system, has continued to incrementally increase. So I like to show that we continue to do more with less and keep up with the growing needs with a level staffing at our department. The middle chart also represents some recent trends that we are continuing to be challenged with workforce-wise with vacancy rates. So really, since coming out of COVID, we have not rebounded very well in terms of being able to fully fill positions. We are continue to deal with a high vacancy rate of around 20 to 24% agency-wide. Some bureaus higher than others, depending on the type of work and things there. But we have continued to keep up with our mission and providing winter maintenance throughout the year and stuff like that. So again, another indication of we continue to do more with less. To meet the budget targets which we were given, which were flat budget targets, some of the changes that were made in terms of positions and staffing are indicated there at the bottom. So we eliminated in the agency submission about 20 positions, 7 full-time, 13 partial, to meet the budget targets. We also had done some other shifts of positions. There was one position in our Division of Aeronautics, Rail, and Transit that we shifted it. It primarily supported the project development division. It was a UAS position, manning drones and providing survey information for projects. So we made the change of shifting that position from general fund to highway fund through a transfer. And there's also within the budget, if you compare some divisions to another, we had realigned our safety section to make it a direct report to the Commissioner's Office to place the emphasis on safety. So it realigned and moved about 8 full-time positions from a bureau and project development from highway design under the front office and a direct report to the Assistant Commissioner. So those are some of the highlights of the big position changes that we did to balance our budget. On the next 2 pages, page 4 and 5, is a real high-level overview of our total budget, the source of fundings, and the relative percentages there, just for a quick snapshot glance there. The overall department is multi-funded with 4 primary funding sources: the Turnpike Fund, the Highway Fund, a very small portion of general funds that support the Division of Aeronautics, Rail, and Transit, and a number of federal funds as well. On page 5, the pie charts there give a relative breakdown of how we really reference our budget. So all of the finances are contained in this budget, but the bigger part of that pie, the municipal aid and construction, is primarily the federal funds that go into our transportation program. And a lot of the decisions on which projects and the level of funding of those programs are addressed in the off-budget years when we do the 10-year plan. The smaller portion of that pie, the operating budget, is primarily funded by the Highway Fund and represents all of the operating needs to staff and maintain the transportation system. So from a high level, that's a very top-level breakout of the department. And it tends to be in the budget that we focus primarily through the budget on the operating portion of the budget. And if there are any questions as I go through, please feel free to stop me and interrupt, or otherwise I will just keep going. So,
Just wondering how much money you've come into fiscal to request in general funds for winter maintenance this fiscal year?
yeah. I will hit on that a little bit
Okay.
later, but I can answer it right off. We've had to transfer, and it hasn't been general funds, it's been highway
Highway
funds.
fund, okay.
We've transferred about $10.5 million to support winter maintenance this
Thank you.
this season. Yeah. Thank you, Senator. So on page on page 6 is a summary page on the Division of Aeronautics, Rail and Transit, and some of the significant variances from 24 to 25, and the variances from 25 adjusted authorized to FY26. And this format, follows throughout the presentation. But the biggest items adjusted in the Division of Aeronautics, Rail and Transit budget by the House had been the House funded $1.5 million each year towards the state match to local transit providers. That had been a request at the agency phase, and that was part of the House funding. So there was some of the background of that was last year's budget, there was a $1.68 million each, roughly each year, general fund appropriation at the very end of the budget through HB2 that went to providing state match to help local transit providers. Again, because it came through HB2, it did not land, it wasn't reflected in our budget when we were given level budget targets to start this budget process. Again, that state match for local transit providers wasn't in our agency presentation, but it was a need that was identified, and it was reflected and funded in the House phase. There were also a couple of minor additions that we added the revenue and expense relative to a park and ride project that we just awarded in December. We did a P3 agreement at the Portsmouth Park and Ride, and when we put the budget together, we had kind of overlooked the receiving the revenue from the lease for that and the budgeting of that income and expense. So that was reflected in the changes by the House as well, too. On page 7 is an overview of kind of the administration part of the department, finance, policy, and administration. And again, the big changes in that area as you go through that when you compare some of the variances from 24 to 25 and to 25 to the 26-27 budget, we'll see that 8 of those positions that were budgeted under project development and highway design, we've shifted to be a direct report to the front office. So that's that bottom bullet there, the safety office funding reclass in FY25. There were some other minor adjustments as we looked through in terms of debt service, technology spending, retiree health adjustments. The other significant thing worth pointing out is we have put a lot of effort into training and employee development as we seek to combat and address the vacancy rate and work on recruitment and retention. We were able to leverage some federal funds to approximately triple our training budget to support our employees and help, again, support recruitment and retention efforts. So that's another minor change that you would see in that comparison. On page 8 is an overview of the federal and state project delivery division. That's primarily the division of project development. Again, the majority of that budget and those federal programs are, you know, the use and the projects and the level of funding are generally determined in the off-budget year through the 10-year plan process. And this area of the budget reflects those decisions. Some of the variances we see are, again, because of the ongoing vacancy rates, some of the delays in some specific projects that we are working to get out. Some other indications, changes in this budget compared to previous ones. In the middle of the page, you'll see the completion of the Garvey debt service in FY26. So that's been an ongoing line item in the budget to pay off Garvey bonds. Garvey bonds were revenue vehicles that we used to finance the widening of I-93. And we'll also see a shift in appropriation for SB 367, again, from some of the funding and some of the decisions for funding the major expansion of I-93. We had taken out a TIFIA loan. SB 367 was a Senate bill that authorized a 4.2 cent gas tax increase dedicated to the dedicated to financing that loan. We have, for the last 9 years, only been paying interest on that loan. We've enjoyed about $20 million that has flowed to betterment type work, rural paving and roads. And in this budget, the full debt service for I-93 kicks in. So you'll see that bottom line of that org code stays the same, but within it, the class lines shift from doing construction work to debt service. And there were also some very minor adjustments as revenue estimates were adjusted at the House phase and apportionment and betterment in SB 367, and those are reflected and summarized there as well. So moving on to page 9, which really kind of summarizes our operations budget and summarizes some of the bigger changes that came as a result of the House budget deliberations. So some of the variances there are explained there, but part of what we had done at the agency phase to meet budget targets was to purposefully, underfund what we felt was needed for some specific areas, particularly winter maintenance and fleet maintenance investment. We had come to the House phase with those shortfalls identified with requests to fund those. It was a $3.5 million request each year to fund the winter retention incentive. The winter retention incentive has been a bonus that we have used each of the last 3 years to incentivize people that don't typically work in highway maintenance but have commercial driver's licenses to come and volunteer to plow for the winter. With the vacancy rates that we've had, it's been what has enabled us to be successful in the last 3 winters. It funds about 150 volunteers which makes up roughly half of the vacancy rate that we have in the highway, in the winter maintenance positions. And it's been very successful. And again, at least in the foreseeable future, we foresee the need to continue that program in order to be successful and meet the winter maintenance needs. So that was the request there, was to fund the winter retention incentive. The House funded, and the House changes, they funded about half of that to go back in. The other part of that within the same organizational unit of winter maintenance was the overall winter maintenance cost. We had requested about $7.6 million each year to meet the 3-year average of what we anticipated we would need. Senator, you had asked about the winter maintenance transfers this year. Historically, over the last several budgets, we have purposefully, and that's with the legislature's direction and approval, purposefully underfunded winter maintenance, or I would say maybe budgeted optimistically, hoping for a light winter or not very severe winter. And with the understanding that if we needed it, we track winter maintenance costs all through the year very closely. We would go back to fiscal for those identified needs. So we followed that same methodology in developing this budget as well too. The requested $7.6 million each year would be to fully fund winter maintenance at what we would project to be a 3-year average. But again, it always depends on the severity of the winter. Again, the House had funded about half of that request and put in about $5.55 million between the winter retention incentive and the winter maintenance cost alignment. At the bottom page there, what we would request, and I think it's just an adjustment of class lines because the bottom line of that org code doesn't change. We would request to fully fund the winter retention incentive. We can't be successful without people to fill the trucks and do the job. So we would request shifting that add back a little bit differently and fully funding the class lines that support the winter retention incentive. That goes forward at the beginning of the winter as well. It's not something we would come back for in the middle of the winter versus the winter maintenance costs. So that would be our request of the Senate to make that small adjustment. The other area that we had identified, or I'd say we purposely underfunded and identified additional needs was in the equipment and fleet replacement. If you look at the line items in the budget, we have it funded at about $6.5 to $7 million each year. On an optimal fleet replacement cycle, based on the parameters and mileage and usage, we should be investing about $11 million every year to keep up with the rollover of the fleet and the aging of those vehicles. So this budget, we identified that shortfall. It's not and for this 1 year, it's absorbable. We still have a relatively healthy budget. It's not optimal, but we will still be replacing trucks as they're needed and things like that. So we are not at this point requesting that, but just pointing out that we are a little underfunded in the fleet replacement. Last year, and again, it is similar to the winter maintenance. When we start our base budget based on the adjusted authorized, last year at the end of the budget through HB2 and some of the surplus funds, there was a general fund allocation for about $4.8 million of fleet investment. Again, that didn't get reflected in our budget, but it did help keep up with those needs in the last budget cycle. And helps us, carry through this much tighter budget cycle.
So on that one, what's the distinction between the general funding for the equipment and the capital funding? Do you come in the capital budget for equipment?
Not desirably. In the
Yeah.
past, we have,
Yeah.
because of, for several budget cycles, we had underinvested
Right.
in fleet maintenance to the tune of only $1 million or only a couple $1 million a year in order to balance budgets. And we were getting very, very far behind in our fleet replacement cycle and the aging condition of the fleet. To address that over a couple of capital budgets, there was a capital budget appropriations for fleet replacement that we had utilized. That's not preferable to be bonding, and we don't think it's necessarily good practice to be bonding equipment repair, but it was a necessity. Do you want to add more?
I would. So it is not preferable to bond equipment that doesn't last very long, and it may not last as long as the debt that you're paying. So when we go for Fund 30 items or HB 25 items, we're looking at items that are really going to last much longer, like buildings, which would last for 40 years or more. Equipment would maybe last for 10. Not a great financial move.
Definitely follow up. So I asked because I was recalling that we had done that in the capital budget, but you will not have a capital budget request
Not for
in
equipment.
25 for equipment, and you've got enough, you think, to carry you through the next 2 years.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, correct.
Senator Rosenwald?
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. What is the balance in the highway fund at the end of fiscal year 27?
The balance from the House surplus statement, I think, was around $11 million.
Thank you.
Is that right? I'm working off memory, but
It looks like 13?
13, okay. from the House
13
base.
million, and that includes the increase in revenue for motor vehicle fees. That's how it got there.
Okay.
Go ahead. Any other, well, there's only 3 of us. Never mind, go ahead.
And I'll just finish up very quickly, if it's all right, Senator. We did have a couple of HB2 requests. They either came up after, or we overlooked them when we filled out Form E with the budget request. But they deal with some RSA changes to address some issues that have come up. The first request would be a change to RSA 236 to add state-owned railroad corridors along with the limits of highway with regard to obstructions or things there. The history there, and it's explained, is that we do have some flooding from some other man-made activities along state railroad corridors. And as we ran into those issues, because it's not specifically identified in RSA, we've had some difficulties in terms of enforcing that. There are no statutory rules enforcing that. So a small change there to RSA 236 to add state-owned railroad corridors along with the limits of highways is what's intended with that request. The second request deals with RSA 262.32, and it's regarding park and ride facilities. Again, there are RSAs dealing with camping and loitering on state facilities. We have had challenges at state park and rides with abandonment of vehicles, particularly campers or even homelessness living out of campers and stuff in state park and rides. So the request there was to clarify some of that language and add the following language that specifically identifies some cost recoupment for removing those vehicles, either from the towing company or if we can track down the owner of the vehicle. And the third HB2 request would be to formalize DOT authority to manage its encumbrances. That relates to the federal program and the federal construction projects we've done. We have a long history, over 20 years, of managing that program within the department. And after discussing with DAS and others, there's no clear statutory or formalized authority for DOT to manage those encumbrances. But due to the volume and the complexity of it and our experience with it, everybody does agree that it makes sense for the DOT to continue to manage those encumbrances. And we were seeking to have that clarity and formalization in statute. So those are the three HB2 requests. I don't know if there's anything else to add or any questions for us. So.
Any questions for the commissioner? Senator Rosenwald.
Thank you. So going back to the abandoned campers, if someone is homeless and living in one, they're probably not likely to have the $2,000 to reimburse. Will you be able to get a towing company to take that camper away, knowing that they'd probably be on the hook?
That would be the goal. Even today, without the authority, without the cost recoupment, we still work with state police and municipalities, the local police, to address those abandoned vehicles and things like that. This just gives us a clearer path to try to recoup some of those costs, whether it is homeless or if it is just an abandoned vehicle that gets left there. It at least gives us the opportunity to pursue it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Senator Waters, did you have a question?
Thanks, Madam Chair. So I'm going back to the budgeted positions and
Sure.
vacancy slide.
Mm-hmm.
So it looks like you're authorized for around, about 1,600 positions maybe.
1,650.
Yeah, and that you're operating with about 1,250.
Correct.
Do you, I guess what I'm trying to ask is, do you anticipate any capacity to be able to fill positions at a better rate, or do you think this is going to be more or less permanent, that you're going to be hovering around that line?
I hope it's not permanent. Like I said, we are trying to address those needs. On the operations side, we do offer, and we have a CDL trainer. It has been helpful to bring some folks in to take advantage and get their CDL. It is a nice benefit that we offer, and it's worthwhile to us, because then if those people stay, they can progress. I think a big part of it will also depend on, ultimately what happens demographically to population in New Hampshire, the overall economic outlook, and ultimately what happens with collective bargaining and stuff too at the state level as well too. I do think state employees, and in particularly a number of the lower paid employees, like our highway maintainers, do not compete well with the private sector or even municipalities. And if there's an opportunity, if that can get rectified through collective bargaining, that may provide opportunities to fill those positions.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. The only thing I'm going to say, I guess we need to talk to Senator Gray. Those three requests.
What time?
Whoa. Dun, 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 dun.
Those three requests that they're requesting, that maybe we should think about putting together some amendments on those.
Those three, HB2.
All right.
Right. I think it's in the presentation, and we can offer whatever writing language, Word documents, or things to help. Or Danielle says we have it already, so, yeah.
Okay. Any other questions from the senators?
Just that flooding penalty will not apply to beavers, right?
I don't know if we can go after the
Okay, all
beavers
right,
for
I
that.
just wondering,
Yeah,
okay, the logs.
right.
All right.
I think that picture is beaver, not humans.
No, it is humans,
Oh,
yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Next up is Commissioner for Human Rights.
This last one, we'll have to wait and see how they receive it. It was the one changing the application for absentee ballot.
Oh, yeah.
Whenever you ladies are ready. And I congratulate Senator Birdsell. She kept me within 20 minutes of the regular time, so.
Thank you so much, Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Katrina Taylor, and I am currently acting as the Assistant Director of the Human Rights Commission. I want to thank you sincerely on behalf of myself and the Commission for your time today. I know your job is not simple, and I know your time is not ample. So thank you very much for giving me the opportunity.
And if I might ask,
yeah.
why are you the assistant here? And
I'm going to pass it over to my friend Kathy here to explain a little bit of that.
So good afternoon. My name is Kathleen Carr. I am the Director of Administration for the Department of Justice. The Human Rights Commission is administratively attached to us, which means that we handle their business office functions, their accounts payable and everything. They handle all their operations independently of us. We're just there to help them with their day-to-day business functions. The Director of Administration has been out and is still out on extended leave at this time. So Katrina is the acting Assistant Director. And the chair of the commission was unable to make it to this meeting today. Thank you.
go ahead.
Okay. So once again, thank you so much for the opportunity to present to you today. Just to go over who we are briefly, the commission was established by the legislature back in 1965 to eliminate discrimination in New Hampshire and enforce RSA 354-A, which is New Hampshire's law against discrimination. As Kathy mentioned, we have a chair of a commissioner. We have commissioners, so they are volunteer commissioners who are appointed by the governor and with the consent of the executive council. And those volunteers serve for five-year terms. So the purpose in eliminating discrimination, we kind of do that twofold. The primary function would be to receive and investigate those complaints of discrimination in housing, employment, public accommodation, and since 2019, we also do public education as well. And the other part of our mission is obviously to provide community outreach and education in an effort to prevent these discrimination complaints. In addition to the employment complaints that we have under our state law, we do have a contract with the Federal Equal Opportunity Employment Commission, and they provide approximately 15% of our funding overall. Just to go over what we are currently funded for and how our organization chart currently looks. Like I said, the governor and executive council appoint the commissioners and approve their nominations. The executive director and the assistant director, I am currently serving in that capacity, but we are in the process, the commission is in the process of hiring permanently for that position. As you see, we do have some vacancies here. We have about 3 vacant positions for investigators, a vacant paralegal, and a vacant secretary, as well as a part-time vacancy. Again, as I know that your time is very valuable, I'm not going to spend too much time on the next 3 slides, but I did just want you to have this information, and obviously we'd be happy to answer any questions you have. But this is statistical information kind of demonstrating the trends in filing over the last 5 years. The Commission has seen a 60% increase in cases filed in the past 5 years, and 2025 is on par to exceed 2024's numbers. Obviously, that means, depending on staffing, the number of cases that are waiting to be assigned continues to rise, unfortunately. So I wanted to go into, obviously, the budget, which is why we're here today. So I apologize for my error on this chart. I did not include 2024 actual, which is significantly lower than the authorized. So our actual that year was $1,310,334. So you'll see our adjusted authorized for 2025 and the governor's recommendation. We were happy to oblige with the governor's recommendation. We're very fortunate and very grateful that she included and recognized us in her budget. So to make those adjustments, we did defund some vacant positions. So we were not eliminating any current positions. And so I'm not going to go line by line on the classes because the House unfortunately voted to abolish us. So our budget, House recommended, as you can see, is 0 in comparison to the governor's budget. And on the last slide, we just kind of wanted to provide you an overview of the basics of what we believe the negative impacts could be to the elimination of such a very important agency to the folks in New Hampshire.
Questions from the senators? Seeing none, you're all set. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I very much appreciate it.
Retirement. I've done that a couple of times. How many people are going to come up to testify? Just 2? All right. I'm ready when you are.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Jan Goodwin. I'm the Executive Director of the New Hampshire Retirement System. With me to my left is Marie Mullen, our Director of Finance. In the audience are 2 other members of our staff, Rick Fabrizio, our Director of Communications and Legislative Affairs, and Mark Kavanaugh, our Assistant Chief Counsel and Director of Compliance. We are very pleased to be here this afternoon to present you our budget and request that you restore the back of the budget reductions that the House put in place. Before you, you have a presentation that looks like this.
Apparently it's on its way. Go ahead.
On page 2, as you can see, we'll be covering 4 different areas today, highlights on recent accomplishments, initiatives that are in place, as well as the challenges and opportunities that we face, and then what we're here for that you're most interested in is our budget review. Page 3, in the past fiscal year, we hit $1 billion in pension benefits that were paid to our retirees and beneficiaries. With most of our retirees and beneficiaries living in state, most of these retirement benefits support local economic activity. We also transitioned to an updated pension administration system, a PAS, which replaced a 20-year-old system. This was a 6-year process, and because of that, Many other important initiatives were deferred, and we would like to address them in our budget for the next biennium. We continue to receive unmodified or clean audit opinions for our financial statements, and we've also implemented all of the 2024 legislative changes that you all passed. Page 4. As some of you remember, in 2010, NHRS implemented a 30-year plan to amortize our unfunded liability, and it's working. The unfunded liability has been decreasing since 2020, and the funded ratio has been increasing steadily over time. Please be advised that any unfunded legislative mandates for benefit increases would increase our unfunded liability and will cause employer rates to increase. Page 5 shows historical information on our employer contributions by the different groups. The top line is the fire members, the next blue line is the police members, the green line is the teachers, the orange line is for state employees, and the dark blue line on the bottom is for the employees of political subdivisions. You'll note that they peaked for the biennium of 2022 through 2023. That's because in the prior years, we had assumed a lower rate of return. The rate of return is important because that is the discount rate for our liabilities. So when we decrease that rate, our liabilities increase, and because of that, employer contributions have to increase so that we can stay on track to pay down our unfunded liability over time. Page 6 shows the details of how the decreases in employer contributions have been for the last 2 biennia. We have the board certified the rates for the fiscal year 26-27, and again, they decrease from that of the prior biennium. Page 7 shows our continued progress on our funded ratio. You can see that there are a couple of dips in 2015 and in 2019. Those were years in which the board, upon recommendation from our actuary, reduced our expected rate of return. But we are definitely on the right trajectory. Page 8 shows how our assets have been increasing over time from $5.8 billion in 2012 to $12.3 billion at June 30, 2024. And even with all the recent market turmoil, our net assets as of yesterday were $12.3 billion. Page 9. In June, the board voted to adopt revised actuarial assumptions based on the results of a 4-year experience study. The actuary recommended increasing the payroll growth by 0.25% to reflect price inflation growth over the past 4 years. And we were very relieved that the actuary did not recommend any reduction in the assumed rate of return at that time, so it stayed at the 6.75%. Page 10 gives you an overview of how our net investment returns have been over different time periods. And the good news is that these are very competitive with those of other public pension plans. Page 11 shows how our annual returns have varied over time. The blue bars are the actual returns for each fiscal year. The gray line, in contrast, is the actuarial rate of return using a 5-year smoothing. Our goal over time is the 6.75%. If we did not use the smoothing, the employer contribution rates would be as volatile as the financial markets are. So that's why we have the gray line to use our to assess our metrics. Page 12. This slide shows the historical and projected data related to our unfunded liability. The gray line reflects the unfunded liability level since 2007 through 2024 and the projected unfunded liabilities in the future. The individual bars on the right side of the chart are for the future years, are comprised of the June 30, 2017 initial unfunded liability. At that time, it was $5 billion, and that's the teal line. The post-2017 gains and losses are being amortized over a 20 years closed period, in contrast with the 2017 liability, which is being amortized over a 30-year time period. As you can see, some of those periods have gains, such as the crimson bar for 20 through 2020 and 2021, due to the high investment income for that period, and those reduce the unfunded liability. So that's why the gray line is lower than the tops of the bars, because that's the actual unfunded liability. Page 13, we have numerous ongoing initiatives to improve efficiency at NHRS. We have revamped the strategic planning process and developed a 3-year strategic plan for fiscal years 25 through 27, focusing on 4 goals: enhancing our new pension administration system, improving organizational effectiveness and accountability, increasing the capabilities of our investment office, and improving organizational effectiveness and accountability. We continuously review and revise our fund's asset allocations with a goal to reducing volatility and provide steady cash flows. We launched an upgrade of our member and retiree online portal, My Account, and we also continue to maintain and expand various cybersecurity enhancements to ensure the safety of our members' and retirees' confidential information. Page 14. We continue to build on the pension administration software implementation by monitoring member and employer service levels and developing a long-term plan for future service enhancements consistent with our 3-year strategic plan. We also continue to review the investment portfolio to see if we can reduce expenses and increase performance, at the same time managing risk, return, and liquidity. And we continue to be affected by legislation that is passed. Since 2007, there have been more than 110 legislative changes to our enabling statute. Each one of these has required changes in our policies, procedures, and constituent communications. At this time, I will turn the presentation over to Marie Mullen, our Director of Finance.
Hello, good afternoon. On page 15, we have a chart here of our historical budget versus actual admin expenses. With this chart, what we're trying to show is that our budgets have been relatively flat during the last few years, during a period of high inflation, as well as to note that we do not receive any federal funds, and during the COVID epidemic, we did not receive any federal funds at that time as well. So our focus has been on the implementation of our pension administration system. As you can see, we have that PGV3, that's what we call our pension administration system. We have the budget and actuals for that, and we've been focusing on that for the past 6 years, as the executive director had mentioned before. If you turn to page 16 and page 17, page 17 is our budget, and it shows the progression through the process from the agency phase to the governor and then to the House budget. Our operating budget was approved by our Board of Trustees back in August before we submitted our agency phase. The House, in their House phase, passed a back of the budget reduction, as you can see on page 17 in red, of $4.2 million in FY26 and $4.5 million in FY27.
I think we have a question from Senator Hurst.
Okay.
Why don't you go ahead and finish that piece, and I'll ask after you're done.
Okay, all right. Our budget is wholly funded from the trust fund assets and does not include any state funds. Therefore, back of the budget reduction does not free up funds for use elsewhere. It cannot be used anywhere else. It can only be used for the trust and the assets in the retirement system. We developed the budget based on our 3-year strategic plan, and it was to address our deferred initiatives. put on hold over the past 5 years. So our 2-year budget is 38.7 million. There's a 41% increase for fiscal year 26 and a 1% increase for fiscal year 27 over 26. These are primarily driven by IT upgrades, modernization projects, and salaries and benefits to support new staff positions aligned with the strategic plan. If you go to page 18,
Okay, now.
Go for
it. I'll ask the question.
Thank you, Senator.
So if I understand this correctly, your budget is specifically, your board voted on it, it has no general funds, and the money that for your budget is through the retirement fund, correct?
That is correct.
So what good does it do to cut your budget when it's no general funds by 4.2 and 4.4?
I can go into the impacts on the next page. I can tell you the impacts of cutting the budget.
I don't understand that. Okay, go ahead.
Well, before you do go on.
Yes, sir.
I have had conversations with members in the House in the division that takes care of this, and I would direct you to go talk to them about why they did what they did. And
Sure, okay.
not that we will include it or reverse it, but that you'll understand. Absolutely, Senator.
So when I'm looking at House Bill 1, it seems like the governor put $33 million of general funds in the budget, which the House took out. What was that for?
That was related to the Group 2 bill that's in HB 2. So our understanding is the governor put it in House Bill 1 in our operating budget. It was also in House Bill 2, so it was double counted. So the House removed it from our operating budget, but it's still in House, but there's still a portion of the bill in House Bill 2 related to Group 2.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Senator Birdsell for question.
Then I have a question related to that. So with the Group 2, that's the money that the governor has put in for the Group 2, that is going to be basically general funds, correct?
That is our understanding. I don't know if
Okay.
Jack's nodding over there.
Yes.
Follow up?
Continue.
So if that's going to be general funds, then we're going to need to follow that all the way through till this Group 2 fully retires, correct? So it's going to be a general fund budget, in the budget for the general fund for the next 10 some odd years.
Yes, I believe that the way the bill is written in HB 2, it's a 10-year, it's about $27.5 million over a 10-year period.
Will this eventually hit the the municipalities' expenses?
It should not if the calculations, you can click, I don't know if you want to clarify, but the calculations that we have from our actuaries are estimating that the 10 years at the $27.5 million would cover the changes. So as long as that is appropriated over that period of time, it would cover, and it should not impact the employer rates at the municipalities.
Thank you.
If you want to, if they want you to testify, you can sit right there and turn the mic on.
Mark Kavanaugh. I just wanted to clarify that she was speaking to the underfunding and that the $27.5 million over the course of 10 years would more than cover the cost, slightly more than the full cost. There is a relatively small increase in employer contributions going forward for what we call the normal cost component of the benefit changes. So we haven't done a fiscal note on this, we just received it last week. Well, we got our actuary report last night, and that impact would be for political subdivisions, a 1.34% increase in police and a 1.46% increase in fire contributions. And that's to cover what they call the normal cost.
That's one, I'm sorry, 1.36,
1.34 increase in the police and 1.46 for fire.
is that divided amongst all the municipalities?
That's political subdivisions. It's the same for the state in this case. So it's not always, but it is this case.
Thank you.
Additional questions? Senator Lang?
Apologize for being late. So again, is this what they consider a terminally funded solution? So for 10 years, we're going to pay it, then we don't pay it anymore, it falls off the budget?
That's correct.
Senator Waters?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. So as I understand it, though, as we deal with the unfunded liability, that this chart here that shows the rates so going down, that will continue to go down considerably as we deal with the unfunded liabilities. So that, would you be able to suggest that, given that increase that was just been described, how it would maybe wash out with the expected reduction because of the unfunded liability getting amortized?
Yes, Senator Gray, Senator Waters, we expect that the future employer contribution rates until the unfunded liability is amortized in 2039 will be very similar to what they are in the current biennium.
Okay.
It's not until we get closer to 100% funding that the employer contribution rates will decrease.
So if I may, I just was seeing that there have been slight decreases in that chart.
Yes.
And I wondered if that was related to that, or was it other factors?
They were largely what is driving the changes in the employer contribution rates are the big increase that we had in 21 was because of 22, 23 was because of the change in the assumed rate of return going from that from 7.25 to 6.75%, and what's been decreasing the employer contribution rates since that biennium has been the very positive investment returns of fiscal year 21.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr.
Senator Lang?
Sorry, I had one more question regarding the changes to Group 2. My understanding was in the House, at the last minute, they negotiated a 7-year instead of a 5-year to deal with the spiking issue, as they call it, over in the Senate, and that resulted in an annual reduction in the amount of money that was needed. Do you know anything about that?
Well, it was a little more complicated. HB2, as originally introduced, called for an elimination of what we call the 7-year rule that applied to Tier A. And it says that if your average special duty pay in your high 3 years, the benefits calculator exceeds your last 7-year average, we're going to limit you to the lower 7-year average. The governor's bill, in contrast to HB 727, which was the standalone Tier B bill in January, which didn't touch the 7-year rule because it's Tier A, the governor's bill took that out. So all current Tier A's would no longer be subject to it, and these Tier B's, as they meet the new vesting dates that proposed and essentially become Tier A's, would not be subject to it. And this had a certain cost. I believe it was around $19 million. And so in the Senate put it back, the finance and the House Finance put it back in. And so essentially by putting it back in, restored this current state of law. This would have removed the limitation, and without that limitation, it had a cost of $19 million. By putting it back in, you're not going to incur the 19 million, but it's not really a savings because you're restoring things to the way they are currently.
Thank you.
Senator Bertzel, you have a question?
Last one, I promise. So when you say in your slide 4, it says unfunded legislative mandates increase the unfunded liability. I'm going to presume, and correct me if I'm wrong, that if we are funding the group 2, then that would not be an unfunded liability. So I'm sorry, it wouldn't be an unfunded mandate, so so it wouldn't be an unfunded liability?
Correct.
Okay.
If we receive the terminal funding for a legislative change for an increase to benefits, then we don't increase the unfunded liability.
Thank you.
Just as an example, last term, we reduced I should say, we took the point at which Group 2 Tier B people were gaining 2.5% or the multiplier back to 15 years, and we terminally funded that so it would not affect things going forward. But if we did a COLA or something like that, then that would be, and not terminally funded, that would be an increase, and that would have its own payoff period, which would extend beyond the 2039 period. Does that clarify anything for anybody? Because they're shaking their heads up, yes. Clear as mud. Okay. We'll continue on, and if they have questions, they can ask you.
So on slide 18, these are some of the impacts with that back of the budget change that was made. We have IT projects and several initiatives in here that were funded, and without those funds, we would not be able to do these initiatives. So we need a financial system upgrade. Our software is no longer being supported. So that's one initiative. We're looking to get improved annual GASB reporting software. The state and my former employer, DOT, when I was there, we had Workiva. It's a software system to aid, and it greatly reduces the time to put out the annual report. So we're looking to acquire that software as well. We need to update the NHRS website and related communications. We're required to be in ADA compliance by 2027, so we need funds to be able to do that as well. We have our My Account member portal and web-based app, system security. So this is greatly important for our members and retirees so we can keep their information safe, their banking information safe. We have multiple projects in line to do that. We need advanced data encryption and update strong authentication protocols to make sure we can keep their data safe and secure. We have an improved document management system that we're looking to enhance, and any software changes related to legislative benefit changes, those come out of our operating budget. Generally, those are not funded in the legislative bills that are provided. And the Group 2 bill that we've just been discussing, we've had estimates upward of $500,000 from our software vendor, depending on the complexity of those changes. So those are part of our budget as well, to be able to implement those changes in the software. And that does not include the personnel costs that would be incurred internally to be able to make those changes as well. So finally, on page 19, we just respectfully request the committee vote to remove the reductions in section 11 of HB 1, and we welcome any other additional questions related to our budget.
Senator Waters.
I know you talked about it before, but could you just clarify for me, if that back of the budget reduction is made, it comes out of your other funds, not the general fund?
That's correct.
So that making that cut would decrease, affect those projects, but it would decrease what you're taking from the trust fund.
Correct.
To that amount without having any impact on the general fund.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Additional questions? Senator Rosenwald.
Senator Birdsall asked this before, but I guess I'm wondering, since you say you're self-funded, what was the purpose of this back of the budget cut? It doesn't save general funds.
Again, Senator, I would direct you to have a conversation with the people who actually did it. The retirement system may not know the nuances of it, and I would respectfully ask you to speak to them.
Well,
Additional questions?
our budget now.
Yes. And
Thank you.
certainly, there may be an amendment that says to reduce that. But again, if we're asking for motive, all right, the only way to get that motive is talk to the people who did it and not the people who received it. Okay? Not seeing any other questions, thank you very much. And
Thank you very much.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Public Relations Labor Board.
This the last one?
Yep.
Yep.
If McGuire was here, I should have asked him.
When you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Doug Ingersoll. I'm the Executive Director and Counsel for the Public Employee Labor Relations Board. I have worked for the board since 2006. There are currently 3 full-time classified employees at the board, myself included. The board is authorized to have 9 members representing management, labor, and the public interest. The public interest members serve as the chairs. And currently, we hope that those public interest members are attorneys with litigation experience, which is presently the case. I do have a very brief handout, and I'll try to kind of track that as I go through. I think our budget book is at page 378 in the materials. The handout at pages 2 through 3 provides some detail about the mission of the Public Employee Labor Relations Board and the work we do. I won't go into all the details except to say that we are the board responsible for administering the state's public sector collective bargaining law, which applies to employers and employees throughout the state working for municipalities, school districts, counties, cities, the state executive branch, the judicial branch, the university system of New Hampshire, and the community college system of New Hampshire. Pages 4 to 5 of the handout are 2 organizational charts. The first chart is under the current law and shows our current arrangement, and the second chart is based on statutory changes in HB 2, which call for the PELRB to take over administrative responsibilities for the Personnel Appeals Board and the Right to Know Ombudsman's Office. And that organizational chart represents my crude attempt to express that relationship as I understand it today. In terms of basic activities, the PELRB is responsible for determining the bargaining units that are in existence in the state and new ones that want to be formed. That is an ongoing process. For example, today we received 2 petitions to form 2 new bargaining units. So the number is changing. Sometimes bargaining units dissolve and go away. To handle the different kinds of cases that come into our office, we do hold evidentiary hearings, which are essentially the same as the hearings that you would encounter in the Superior Court and in the District Court, parties tend to be represented by counsel. Rules of evidence don't apply, but we receive testimony from witnesses and we receive exhibits, and factual findings have to be made based on the record presented, and then a legal analysis is done to determine the outcome in a particular case. At page 6 of the material, you'll see a couple of tables. The table at the bottom, I believe, is the one that shows in overview form the number of bargaining units by employer category, and to the right of that, it also shows the related collective bargaining agreements that we have on file for those bargaining units that are current. And by current, I mean contracts that have not expired. So on a percentage basis, 97% of the contracts we have on file are current, and that's actually probably the highest number that I've seen since I've worked for the board. And just above that table, also on page 6, you'll see some detail about the different kinds of activity we engage in. It's a summary of fiscal year 25 year-to-date activity, kinds of cases that come in, the things we do, elections that we hold. I won't go through them one by one. In terms of our budget request, at page 7 at the top, there was just a very high-level summary going back to fiscal year 24 actual up to what we are asking in 26 and 27 from the Senate. The governor's budget reduced funding for our vacant position. That funding was restored by the House at a higher level to accommodate a reclassification based on the statutory change in HB2 that I mentioned. But not much else was done and related to that. And I'm not here today to speak to the Personal Appeals Board budget or the Right to Know Ombudsman budget. But I'm familiar with how those budgets have proceeded through the process, and essentially the budgets that the governor has submitted for those two entities were significantly reduced, apparently based on the belief that a lot of those expenses were unnecessary if the PELRB was now assuming this new administrative responsibility. At the bottom of page 7 of the handout, you'll see I put in 7 what I call budget notes, and those just are to flag basic things about our budget. I'll quickly go through them one by one. Note 1 is the Class 10 and Class 60 activity that I just mentioned to restore funding for the vacant position. I wanted to point out under Class 22, we're in the last 2 years of a 5-year lease at our present location. Class 3 is Class 27. That encompasses DOIT shared support services, technology, and software, including the case management system that we implemented a couple of years ago. As part of my appearance here today, I have asked for additional funding to Class 27 based on the assumption that we are going to proceed with new administrative responsibilities for PAB and RTK. There is a spreadsheet that I submitted. I assume it's in your packet, but for fiscal year 2026, the Class 27 increase is $44,047. For fiscal year 27, it's $32,297. And those are numbers that I determined in a meeting with my contact at DOIT, who oversees all of those areas for us and makes recommendations. It works out to, based on onboarding 7 new people administratively, it works out to about $7,000 per person in year 1, and then it drops to about $5,000 in year 2. Jumping back to that, my notes section. Class 30, we do have funds to address certain equipment. I had requested in the previous biennium funding for this purpose, and it turned out to be grossly inadequate. So I have renewed that request with with higher amounts, and some of that money could be dedicated to address some of the administrative issues that may come up with this potential new arrangement. Note 5 is Class 39. That was also part of my discussion with DOIT. In year one, the recommendation was to increase by $6,500, and in year two by the same amount. And that total is part of the, I believe it's part of that breakdown figure I gave you for the per person increase.
Senator Waters?
On those things that you just went through, I see here the Senate request. Are those, is that inclusive of the things you've been describing?
So the specific Senate requests I've made here are reflected, that the dollars aren't pointed out here in note 2 or note 3, nor are they pointed out in note 5, but they're pointed out on a spreadsheet, which I believe it was given to us to submit to the Senate Finance Committee with any changes that we were asking for to the House. So if you don't have that spreadsheet, I can certainly get it to you.
Yeah, I just have the one that has references.
It's not in the handout, I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm referring to a spreadsheet that's in my notebook.
Yeah. I just was getting a little confused.
Yeah,
Thank
no,
you.
I understand your question now.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So did we get an answer to whether the Senate requests for 26 and 27 include
I
your
think it
new
does not.
chart?
I think the answer was that it doesn't.
So I think the answer to that is it does. The table at the top. I'm sorry, I thought you were, I thought you were wondering, I thought you were wondering whether the spreadsheet that I've been turning
What I want to
to.
know is this top line here
Yeah.
in the handout incorporate what you are describing was in the spreadsheet? So that total of the 665 request,
Approximately 50,000 in the first year, 40,000
yeah,
in the second.
yeah, that's what I'm.
It does.
That incorporates,
It does.
okay, thank you, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
But
for
note 1 is already included. No,
Senator, you need to turn the mic on.
note 1 is already included in the House budget, right?
Yes.
So this $90,000 total is for the rest of the
It's for Class 27 and Class 39, which is this DOIT. For some reason, telecom is broken out into a different class, but it's still under the DOIT umbrella, as I understand it.
So it's only those two classes.
Those are the areas that I looked at for, yes, technology, and that's the request that I'm making to the Senate Finance Committee in terms of a change from the House.
Thank you.
Additional questions from the senators at this time? Back to you.
Okay, thank you. I know you've already heard from the Right to Know Ombudsman, and you heard yesterday from the Personnel Appeals Board, and there was reference to the new Office of State and Public Sector Labor Relations, which in its essence just states that the PELRB is now administrative responsible for those two entities, but they are still supposed to do the work they're charged to do under their respective statutes and in accordance with their respective rules. We have a hearing room, which is certainly available for Personnel Appeals Board to use and for the Right to Know Ombudsman to use. We don't have the kind of office space that I believe the Right to Know Ombudsman needs. Based on my visits with the current ombudsman over the last 4 weeks, he seems to require a normal physical office space in contrast to board members who tend to come to our facility simply for the hearing process, and I think the same practice is followed with the Personnel Appeals Board. One of the differences between my board and the Personnel Appeals Board is that Personnel Appeals Board is funded to write their own decisions, but they do that off-site. Historically, they were supported by administrative services, but there were conflicts which I guess justified establishing them as an independent operation. I heard yesterday the chair make a brief reference to the possibility or the idea that perhaps the BTLA and the Housing Appeals Board and possibly the RTK could migrate over to the judicial branch. I don't know if that's a real possibility or not. But if that doesn't happen with respect to the right to know ombudsman, my suggestion for this new arrangement would be that the ombudsman and the Personnel Appeals Board share office space, which the Personnel Appeals Board has reserved over at the main building on the Fruit Street campus, and that the Personnel Appeals Board hired staff, which it originally intended to hire and included funding for in the governor's budget, and that staff's support the Personnel Appeals Board and the Right to Know Ombudsman, which essentially is the plan the House had, only they were going to use our vacant position to do that work. And then we would have a relationship in terms of our hearing room space, which is not quite at maybe 2/3 the size of this space, and it's about twice the size of the office space on hold for the PAB. My recommendation is that we continue to play a role in getting the PAB and the Right to Know Ombudsman's operations up and running. They're basically floating right now without any kind of state-connected structure. Personnel Appeals Board is using personal equipment, which the DOIT is strongly against. And so this funding that we've included in Class 27 and Class 39 would address all those issues for Personnel Appeals Board and Right to Know Ombudsman. It would allow them to have connectivity with the state network. It would allow them to interface with our case management system, which would incorporate an enterprise solution to expand to include their dockets. I think to do this cleanly, a little more work is needed on all three budgets to make sure that the fundings are in the correct lines. I take no position on the amount of funding that is necessary in the Personnel Appeals Board Class 50 per diem or the Right to Know Ombudsman Class 50 per diem in terms of whether that's sufficient for them to get their work done. I know the Right to Know Ombudsman's budget in terms of compensation for the services that the Ombudsman provides is dramatically less than it was in the last 2 fiscal years. But it's not up to me to make that determination. I suspect that what's in Class 50 for RTK will be exhausted in pretty short order, which means if the expectation is that he's going to serve as an alternative and an expedited option to going to Superior Court with right to know requests, that it may not work out the way that it was intended. That's all I have. I'll take any other questions.
If you have looked into the space situation, is there more space over where the others are, back on Fruit Street? So what if I moved you there?
Yeah, there's what I heard yesterday from the contact person at DAS who was managing or holding the space for PAB is that there's a couple of conference rooms available, but he didn't identify any additional office space or hearing room space. Certainly, PLRB has always been off-site and independent and separated from other state offices because of the work we do, so that we don't form relationships with people who are in bargaining units who may be involved in the cases that come to us. Our staff, obviously, we're unrepresented and we're never going to be in a bargaining unit. But that's been the tradition. I think it's a good arrangement. I think we all like to think that we can overcome any potential conflicts or friendships that we form in the workplace. But ideally, we'd like to stay away from those temptations.
I don't think I got an answer to the question whether or not there would be room on Fruit Street for you, your organization, to move in with the Personnel Advisory Board.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I thought I answered the information I received yesterday when I asked for the status of the space that's currently being held for the PAB, which is 268 square feet. Whether there was other space as part of that was no, there isn't. But there are conference rooms and an auditorium available. And I'm assuming he meant if there was an interest in having formal pre-hearings and hearings there, they could be accommodated. Under our lease and under, I think, most state leases, anytime suitable state space becomes available, the leases can be terminated and operations can be moved into state-owned building. I think Commissioner Arlinghouse would point out that there are transaction costs associated with that, resetting all the IT stuff, but that's always been an option. But I'm not aware of any suitable alternatives at this point. But I'll also represent that I haven't otherwise gone on a in-depth search.
Additional questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
For the committee, one of the things that we have this year that we really haven't had in the past is the number of items that have been added to the budget that were bills in the House. And they fall into two big categories. Ones that we have the bill and are going through the policy committees, and ones where they have retained those bills. And apparently, from the things that I found out, they did get a vote in the policy committee over in the House and on the floor, but then were sent to finance, and finance is the one who retained the bills. What my plan is to take no action on those that we have here in the Senate, those bills, and for possible removing them from House Bill 2, but not necessarily. But as they go through the process in the policy committees, we will get an indication whether or not the Senate's position is that they're good the way they are, they need amendment, etc. And there will also, because we are a body politic, we'll also get an idea of the politics that would be involved in either taking them out or leaving them in House Bill 2. The second category were the ones that they did not send us. I have recommended to the Senate President, and I believe it's going to happen, is that the language out of House Bill 2 will be clipped and put into however a communication with the policy committees so they can come back and give us the same kind of a recommendation, whether it's the policy is good to go without revision, it needs revision, and whether or not that revision is worth our time trying to do it or not. And that way also make a decision on those and eliminate the possibility that we have a bill that nobody in the Senate has really looked into for inclusion or not inclusion into the final product. So anybody that has comments on that, get back to me or get back to the Senate President. But unless I get rudder orders the other way, that's what we're going to try to do to manage those additional bills that would not normally have come to us in House Bill 2. Senator Rosenwald.
Thank you. Question. If the Senate's already taken a position or takes an ITL or re-refer position, would we not take those things out of House Bill 2?
That is certainly a possibility, but again, we've got politics involved, and if there is some nuance in the wording that we had compared to the wording that is in House Bill 2, we need to understand that, and the policy committee is the one who can best tell us that.
Thank you.
All right. Does anybody want to go into executive session on the first bill we heard today, or I got a bunch of other faces, so we will Our business today being complete, we'll adjourn.
All right.